The golden throne room of Pharaoh Ramses II shimmered under the flickering glow of torchlight, its polished stone walls etched with scenes of divine victories and eternal glory. Incense filled the air, sweet and suffocating, masking the sweat and fear of those summoned before Egypt's living god. Courtiers bowed low, their foreheads pressed to the cold marble floor, while guards stood rigid, their spears gleaming like sharpened sunbeams. But what happened in this chamber that night would send shockwaves through the entire empire and reveal a hidden network of spies unlike anything the ancient world had ever seen. Before we dive into this dark web of secrets, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. And while you're at it, smash that like button, share this video with someone who loves mysterious history, and hit subscribe so you never miss another shocking ancient spy story. At the center of it all sat Ramses himself, a figure of overwhelming majesty and terrifying power. His headdress glittered with jewels, his eyes cold and unreadable, like the gaze of the gods he claimed to descend from. Before him, bound and trembling, knelt a man whose life now hung by a thread, a high-ranking official accused of treason. The official's linen robes were torn, his knees scraped and bloodied from being dragged through the temple corridors. His lips quivered as he tried to speak, desperate to defend himself. "Great Pharaoh," he stammered, his voice cracking with terror, "I swear by Ra and by the eternal Nile, these accusations are lies. I have served you faithfully for years. I would never—" Ramses raised a single hand. The room fell into a silence so sharp it felt like a blade slicing through the air. "You would never," the pharaoh said slowly, his tone calm yet dripping with menace. "And yet, we know every word you spoke last night, every plan you whispered in the darkness." The official froze, his eyes wide with disbelief. Courtiers shifted uneasily, trading bewildered glances. How could Ramses possibly know such things? There had been no witnesses, no chance for spies to overhear, or so they thought. Ramses leaned forward, his massive golden throne gleaming in the torchlight, his voice dropping to a whisper that seemed to echo from the very walls. "There are eyes that never close, ears that never sleep. Even in the deepest shadows, even behind the thickest walls, nothing escapes the pharaoh." At his signal, two silent figures emerged from behind the colossal stone pillars. They were dressed plainly in linen robes, their heads shaved like temple priests, but there was nothing sacred about their presence. They moved like predators, soundless and cold, carrying with them an aura of dread. One of them held a small scroll sealed with black wax, a seal reserved for messages of death and betrayal. Ramses took the scroll with deliberate slowness and unrolled it before the entire court. His voice rang out as he read the treasonous words the accused man had spoken only hours before, reciting them with chilling precision. Names, places, even the very tone of his whispered rebellion. The condemned man's face twisted with horror. He shook his head violently, screaming, "No! This is impossible. No one was there. No one heard me." Ramses's lips curved into a cold, knowing smile. "No one that you could see." A ripple of fear surged through the court. Even the most powerful ministers and generals paled. These were no ordinary spies. They were something far more terrifying. The pharaoh's invisible army, a network so deeply woven into the fabric of Egypt that even the highest officials were never beyond its reach. The pharaoh's voice thundered through the chamber. "Take him away. Let all of Egypt witness what happens to those who conspire against their god-king." The man's screams echoed against the stone walls as guards dragged him from the room. When the heavy bronze doors slammed shut, the silence that followed was deafening. No one dared move. No one dared breathe too loudly. In that silence, every courtier understood a chilling truth. They were all being watched. For centuries, historians have marveled at the visible splendor of ancient Egypt, its pyramids, colossal temples, and mighty armies. But behind that dazzling facade, there was another Egypt. An Egypt built not on stone and gold, but on secrets, manipulation, and fear. Few today realize that Egypt may have been home to the world's first secret police, a shadowy organization known only by whispers as the eyes and ears of the pharaoh. These agents were far more than mere informants. They were the pharaoh's silent enforcers, infiltrators, saboteurs, and assassins whose loyalty was absolute, and whose presence was invisible. Their mission was terrifyingly simple: protect the pharaoh at any cost, even if it meant silencing entire families or plunging entire regions into paranoia and chaos. The origins of this network are as mysterious as the desert sands themselves. Ancient texts suggest that early pharaohs used spies to root out rebellion, but under Ramses II, this secret force became something much more organized and far-reaching. Their methods were ingenious. A humble scribe copying religious texts might also secretly report on the mood of the temple priests. A traveling merchant could carry messages between agents disguised as routine trade logs. Even priests, who were revered as sacred mediators between mortals and gods, might secretly serve as the pharaoh's informants, whispering secrets in the dead of night. This web of informants created a climate of paranoia. No one could speak freely. Words spoken in confidence might reach the throne by morning. Neighbors, friends, even one's own family could secretly be part of the network. This fear didn't just protect the pharaoh. It divided the people, ensuring no rebellion could ever unite against him. In the days following the trial, the palace became eerily quiet. Ministers who once spoke boldly now weighed every syllable. Generals who had commanded thousands of men exchanged wary glances, unsure who might be listening. Even Ramses's own family lived under suspicion. It was said that the queen herself refused to sleep in the same chamber for more than 3 nights in a row, fearing her servants were reporting her every word to the spymasters. One night, deep in the labyrinthine halls of the palace, Ramses met with his most trusted operative, a man whose true name had been erased from history. He was known only as the Shadow Keeper. The Shadow Keeper knelt, his face hidden beneath a black hood. "The traitor has been silenced," he said, his voice like wind through a crypt. "But there are others, my pharaoh." Whispers rise from the southern provinces. A scribe in Thebes leaks state secrets to foreign envoys, even some of your generals. Their loyalty trembles. Ramses's hands tightened on the arms of his throne. His eyes narrowed. And what of these generals? Do they conspire against me? The Shadow Keeper paused, then spoke carefully. Most remain true. But loyalty is a river. My king, it can change its course without warning. That is why we watch, always. The pharaoh rose, his silhouette towering against the torchlight. Then watch them all. Let no voice, no thought, no dream escape our notice. Egypt will stand eternal, and those who defy me will vanish like grains of sand in the desert wind. At that moment, the full purpose of the network became chillingly clear. This was not simply a defensive tool against rebellion. It was a machine of control, shaping the fate of Egypt from the shadows. The people believed the pharaoh's power came from the gods, but in truth, much of it came from this hidden army of spies, an empire within an empire, invisible and unstoppable. But even as Ramses expanded his secret network, a dangerous question began to stir. What happens when the watchers themselves become more powerful than the king they serve?
The night air above Thebes was thick with heat and the heavy scent of lotus flowers drifting from the palace gardens. The grand capital of Egypt gleamed like a jewel under the moonlight, its temples casting long shadows over the Nile's dark waters. But beneath this serene surface, fear and suspicion churned like an unseen current, threatening to rip the empire apart. The events of the trial had spread through the city like wildfire. Merchants whispered nervously at market stalls. Temple priests cast suspicious glances at one another, and even the humblest laborers lowered their voices to a fearful murmur. No one knew who might be listening. The pharaoh's spies could be anyone, a childhood friend, a trusted servant, even a family member. In taverns and alleyways, a dangerous question was being whispered. If the pharaoh sees all, who is watching the pharaoh? 2 figures moved silently through the darkened corridors of the palace, their footsteps barely audible over the rustle of linen robes. One was the Shadow Keeper, the mysterious spymaster whose name had been deliberately erased from history. The other, a younger agent named Neket, was among the newest recruits to the secret network known only as the eyes and ears of the pharaoh. Neket's heart pounded in his chest as he followed his master deeper into the labyrinth. Every flickering torch seemed to cast accusing shadows on the walls. He had heard stories about this place. Chambers where prisoners were made to vanish without a trace. Rooms where even high priests confessed secrets they hadn't realized they held. The Shadow Keeper finally stopped before a door made of heavy cedar and bound with bronze. With a single motion, he unlatched it and slipped inside, beckoning Niket to follow. The room was lined with scrolls and clay tablets, each covered in symbols and cryptic notes. Maps of the empire sprawled across the walls, marked with red ink and tiny figurines representing towns, armies, and suspected traitors. It was like stepping into the Pharaoh's invisible battlefield, where wars were fought with whispers instead of swords. The Shadow Keeper spoke without turning, his voice low and deliberate. Our power lies not in swords or chariots, but in silence. A rebellion can be crushed before a single arrow flies, if we know the right voices to silence first. Niket swallowed hard. And the man executed at the trial. Was he truly guilty, Master? The Shadow Keeper paused. His hooded head tilted slightly, as if weighing the question. Guilt is irrelevant, he said coldly. What matters is the stability of the throne. A whisper of rebellion is as dangerous as rebellion itself. Better to cut out the tongue before it speaks of treason again. Niket's stomach churned. He had joined the network, believing he was serving the god's chosen ruler. But now he began to see the darker truth. This was not merely about protecting Egypt, it was about controlling it completely. Meanwhile, far from the palace, unrest simmered in the southern provinces. Taxes were rising, food supplies were dwindling, and local leaders began to question whether Ramses still had the favor of the gods. In the city of Aswan, a scribe named Menkaure secretly met with foreign envoys from Nubia, offering them information about Egypt's military movements in exchange for promises of protection should rebellion break out. What Menkaure didn't know was that he was already being watched. A lone figure followed him through the winding alleys that night, blending seamlessly with the shadows. When Menkaure entered his home, the spy slipped to the window, listening intently. Every word he heard would be recorded and sent to Thebes by morning, encoded in the language of merchants, so that even if intercepted, no one but the network would understand its true meaning. By the next sunrise, Ramses would know exactly who was plotting against him. In the grand temple of Amun, even the sacred halls were not safe from the pharaoh's invisible grip. High priest Harhotep had served the gods faithfully for decades, or so everyone believed. But as he prepared offerings to the statues of Amun-Ra, he whispered quietly to a young acolyte at his side. "The pharaoh grows reckless," Harhotep muttered, his voice barely audible over the chants. "He believes himself divine, but he is still a man. Men bleed, and men can fall." The acolyte nodded solemnly, then excused himself to fetch more offerings. Instead, he slipped into a hidden chamber beneath the temple, where a small wooden box awaited. Inside was a scroll and a tiny wax seal bearing the mark of a falcon's eye, the symbol of the spy network. Within hours, the words Harhotep had spoken would reach the Shadow Keeper himself. This was the true brilliance and terror of the network. Loyalty and betrayal were indistinguishable. Even a revered priest, cloaked in ritual and holiness, could unknowingly be standing at the edge of a trap. Back in the palace, Ramses listened as the Shadow Keeper delivered his latest reports. Scrolls covered the pharaoh's table, each one filled with lists of names, places, and secret plots. "The southern provinces grow restless," the Shadow Keeper said, unrolling a scroll marked in crimson. "A scribe named Menkaure spreads sedition and conspires with Nubians. His contacts will be eliminated tonight. The high priest of Amun speaks against you in whispers. His acolytes will be instructed too. Correct him." Ramses's jaw tightened. His voice was steady, but his eyes burned with fury. "Crush the scribe. Make an example of him. As for the high priest," he paused, considering. "Silence his whispers, but let his body live. The people must continue to believe the gods stand with me." The Shadow Keeper inclined his head, his expression hidden beneath the hood. "It will be done, my pharaoh." As he turned to leave, Ramses called out, his voice echoing in the chamber. "Tell me, Shadow Keeper, do you ever doubt? Do you ever question whether those you serve are truly loyal?" For a long moment, there was silence. Then the spy master answered, his tone calm and eerily detached. "I question everyone, my king. Even myself." Days later, Menkaure's body was found floating in the Nile, his mouth stuffed with reeds, a grim message to anyone who might dare to leak state secrets. Publicly, it was declared an accident. Privately, everyone knew the truth. The Pharaoh's spies had struck again. Fear spread faster than the floodwaters of the Nile. Merchants stopped speaking openly. Priests tightened their inner circles. Even generals commanding thousands of soldiers began to look over their shoulders. By now, the lies were so thick, even the truth sounded like deception. What would you have done in this situation? Would you have trusted those around you? Or started to question everyone and everything? But amidst this growing paranoia, a troubling thought began to fester within Neket, the young spy. He had seen too many innocents condemned, too many whispers twisted into crimes. The line between justice and tyranny was blurring before his very eyes. One evening, as he passed through the archives, he overheard two senior agents speaking in hushed tones. "The network grows too powerful," one muttered. "Even Ramses cannot see everything they do now." Some of them serve only themselves. The other nodded grimly. If the Pharaoh is not careful, the very empire he seeks to control may slip from his grasp, and into theirs. Neket's blood ran cold. Could it be true? Was the invisible army beginning to turn against its master? As he stood frozen in the shadows, one terrible realization struck him. In a world where no one could be trusted, even the Pharaoh himself might soon become a prisoner of his own spies.
The Nile flowed silently under the pale light of dawn, its waters reflecting the first hints of gold as the sun rose over Thebes. The city seemed peaceful on the surface, but beneath its calm exterior, a storm of secrets and fear was brewing. In the weeks since the scribe Menkare's death, the spy network had grown more aggressive, striking down suspected traitors with increasing speed and brutality. The people no longer merely feared their pharaoh. They feared the unseen eyes and ears that seemed to linger in every shadow. And deep within the palace walls, even Ramses himself began to feel the weight of his invisible army closing in. Neket walked the labyrinthine halls of the palace with his head bowed, careful to reveal no trace of the turmoil raging within him. As a young operative, he had been proud to serve the eyes and ears of the Pharaoh. The network had promised loyalty, purpose, and a sacred duty to protect Egypt from chaos. But now, he could no longer ignore the truth. Innocent lives were being destroyed, and the network was no longer merely a tool of protection. It was becoming a power unto itself. The whispers he had overheard in the archives haunted him. Some of them serve only themselves. The words clung to his thoughts like smoke. If even the senior agents doubted the network's loyalty to the Pharaoh, what hope did Egypt have? As he approached the inner chambers, Neket paused, his heart hammering. Through a partially open door, he glimpsed Ramses himself seated on his golden throne, speaking with the Shadow Keeper. Their voices were low, urgent. "The southern provinces remain restless," the spy master reported, unrolling a fresh scroll. "Our agents intercepted messages between the Nubians and a faction of your own generals. There is talk of an uprising." Ramses's fists clenched. "My own generals dare to conspire against me?" The Shadow Keeper's hooded face remained unreadable. Perhaps. Or perhaps the messages were fabricated to draw suspicion. Truth is malleable. Ramses rose to his feet, his presence filling the room like a storm. "I will not tolerate betrayal, not from the provinces, not from my priests, not from my generals. If necessary, I will drown this land in blood to preserve my throne." The Shadow Keeper inclined his head, his voice calm and chilling. "Then we must act swiftly. Identify the guilty, and if necessary, create guilt where none exists. Fear will keep them in line." Neket's breath caught in his throat. Create guilt where none exists? The network wasn't just uncovering threats, it was manufacturing them. He backed away silently, his mind reeling. Every trial, every execution he had witnessed. How many of those had been based on lies? How many loyal Egyptians had died to maintain the illusion of control? As days turned into weeks, the paranoia within the palace reached a fever pitch. Generals avoided speaking even to their closest allies. Ministers carried scrolls written in code, fearing that even their scribes might betray them. The queen herself refused to eat food prepared by her own servants, suspecting poison in every dish. The Shadow Keeper thrived in this chaos. His network expanded, stretching tendrils into every temple, every market, every household of influence. And Ramses, once the master of this system, began to realize that he no longer fully controlled it. One evening, Ramses summoned the Shadow Keeper to a private audience. The pharaoh's face was drawn and weary, his eyes burning with barely restrained fury. "You told me this network would protect Egypt," he said, his voice trembling with rage. "Yet now, even I am surrounded by spies whose loyalties I cannot discern. Tell me, Shadow Keeper, do they serve me, or do they serve you?" The spy master bowed deeply, though the gesture seemed more mocking than humble. "They serve Egypt, my pharaoh, and Egypt is more than one man, even if that man wears the crown." Ramses stepped forward, his golden headdress glinting in the torchlight. "Do not speak to me in riddles. I am the living god of this land. Without me, Egypt crumbles." The Shadow Keeper's hood tilted slightly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Without us, my king, Egypt never would have stood at all." The words struck Ramses like a dagger. In that moment, he understood the terrifying truth. The network was no longer merely his weapon. It was an empire unto itself, and he was just another figurehead to be controlled or removed. Meanwhile, Nekhet was facing his own dilemma. His loyalty to Egypt warred with his growing horror at the network's actions. Each night, he wrestled with the same haunting question. If the spies were turning against the pharaoh, what was his duty? To the throne or to the truth? That choice came to a head when he was given a new assignment: infiltrate the household of General Satek, one of Ramses's most trusted military commanders. The Shadow Keeper suspected Satek of plotting rebellion, though Nekhet had seen no evidence of it. For days, Nekhet observed the general, listening to his private conversations, studying his movements. What he found was not a traitor, but a man deeply loyal to the pharaoh and deeply afraid of the growing power of the spy network. One night, Satek confided in his wife, his voice shaking with anger. "They have turned brother against brother, soldier against soldier. Ramses believes he commands them, but in truth, they command us all. If this continues, there will be no Egypt left to rule." Nekhet's hands trembled as he recorded the conversation. He knew exactly how the Shadow Keeper would twist these words into a false confession of treason. He faced an impossible choice: obey his orders and condemn an innocent man, or defy the network and risk his own life. The following day, Ramses presided over another trial. The accused this time was General Satek. As the charges were read aloud, Nekhet stood silently among the crowd, his heart pounding. Every evidence presented was a distortion of the truth, carefully crafted by the network to ensure Satek's destruction. The general's wife wept as Satek proclaimed his innocence, his voice echoing through the hall. "My only crime is serving a king who no longer sees who his true enemies are." The court erupted in chaos. Ramses's face darkened, his fury blazing. "Enough! You will die at dawn, and your name will be erased from the annals of Egypt." Satek was dragged away, his screams swallowed by the stone walls. Nekhet's stomach churned with guilt and rage. He had seen the truth, and yet he had done nothing to stop the lie. That night, he returned to the archives and searched feverishly through the network's records. What he found was even worse than he had imagined. Lists of innocents framed as traitors, entire villages marked for eradication, to maintain control, and reports suggesting that even Ramses himself was being fed carefully crafted lies to keep him under the network's thumb. As he stared at the damning evidence, Nekhet realized the full scope of the nightmare. The network was no longer defending the throne. It was replacing it, piece by piece, whisper by whisper. By now, the lies were so thick, even the truth sounded like deception. Do you think Ramses and his generals still believed they were safe, or was the end already closing in, even as they clung to their illusions of power? As the torches burned low, Nekhet swore to himself that he would not let Egypt fall completely into darkness. But to challenge the network was to challenge an enemy that saw everything, heard everything, and trusted no one. And somewhere in the shadows, the Shadow Keeper was already watching, his unseen hand moving the final pieces into place. The trap was nearly complete. And soon, even Ramses, the living god of Egypt, would discover that not even a pharaoh could escape the eyes and ears of his own spies. The great city of Thebes lay cloaked in darkness, its towering temples and colossal statues illuminated only by the flickering glow of torches. The Nile flowed silently through the heart of the empire, reflecting the pale silver of the moon like a blade poised to strike. But within the palace walls, chaos churned beneath a fragile facade of order. The whispers had become screams. Ramses II, the god-king of Egypt, sat alone in his private chamber. His golden headdress rested discarded on the floor, his hands clutching the arms of his throne as if they were the only things anchoring him to reality. The once unshakable ruler now looked haunted, his eyes darting to the dark corners of the room where shadows seemed to move of their own accord. He had built an empire of glory. He had commanded armies, raised monuments, and ruled as a living god. But now, Ramses realized with a sickening dread that he was no longer in control of his own kingdom. The very network he had relied upon, the eyes and ears of the pharaoh, had grown so vast, so powerful, that it answered to no one, not even him. Earlier that night, the Shadow Keeper had come to him bearing urgent news. A rebellion, he claimed, was already underway. Generals were conspiring to overthrow the throne. The southern provinces were rising in arms. Ramses had ordered immediate action, dispatching his spies to crush the threat before it could spread. But now, alone in his chamber, doubt gnawed at him. What if there was no rebellion? What if the network itself had fabricated the threat, not to protect Egypt, but to tighten its grip over the land? A faint sound drew his attention, a whisper of movement near the chamber door. Ramses spun, his hand going to the dagger at his side. From the shadows emerged Neket, the young spy whose conscience had been tested to its breaking point. His face was pale, his eyes wild with urgency. "My Pharaoh," he whispered hoarsely, dropping to one knee. "You are in grave danger. The rebellion is a lie. The network has deceived you." Ramses's eyes narrowed. "What are you saying? Speak plainly." Neket rose, his voice trembling. "The Shadow Keeper controls everything now. The trials, the executions, even the very messages you receive, all twisted to serve his purpose. Setek was loyal. The southern provinces are loyal. But they will fall because the network needs them to fall." Ramses's breath caught in his throat. The truth he had feared was now spoken aloud. Before he could respond, the chamber doors burst open. The Shadow Keeper strode in, his hooded figure a living embodiment of darkness. Behind him came armed agents, their faces cold and unfeeling. "My king," the spymaster said smoothly, bowing with a hint of mockery. "I see you have been entertaining dangerous ideas and dangerous guests." His gaze shifted to Neket, who stood defiant despite the overwhelming odds. "It seems," the Shadow Keeper continued, "that one of our own has been whispering poison into your ears. Shall I remove him?" Ramses's voice trembled with fury. "Enough! I am Pharaoh. I command you to stand down." The Shadow Keeper did not move. His silence was more terrifying than open defiance. Slowly, he raised his head, revealing a faint, cold smile beneath the hood. "Do you, Ramses? Do you truly command us? Or have you merely been a mask we wear, a symbol to keep the people obedient while we rule from the shadows?" The realization crashed over Ramses like a tidal wave. His throne, his armies, his entire empire, all had been carefully manipulated by this man and his unseen web of spies. Neket stepped forward, desperation in his voice. "My Pharaoh, we must act now. If you do not strike them down tonight, Egypt will be theirs forever." For a brief moment, Ramses's old fire returned. He drew his dagger and turned on the Shadow Keeper, his roar shaking the chamber. "I am Egypt. You are nothing without me." But the spymaster merely raised a hand. The armed agents surged forward. In seconds, Ramses was disarmed and forced to his knees. The Shadow Keeper leaned close, his whisper colder than the desert night. "No, my king, Egypt is nothing without us. And you are nothing but a story we choose to tell." As Ramses struggled, Neket saw his chance. He lunged at the spymaster, tackling him to the ground. The chamber erupted into chaos, shouts, clashing blades, the crash of shattered torches. Flames leapt wildly, casting twisted shadows on the walls. "Run, my Pharaoh!" Neket shouted, slashing at an attacker. "If you live, Egypt lives." But Ramses did not run. Even in his final moments, he refused to flee. Grabbing a fallen spear, he hurled it with the strength of a warrior king. The weapon struck true, piercing the shadow keeper through the chest. The spymaster's eyes widened in shock. For the first time, he was silent. The other agents faltered, their unity shattered. Nagit seized Ramses by the arm. Together, they drove the remaining spies from the chamber. But as the last one fled, Ramses collapsed, blood staining his robes. "My Pharaoh!" Neket cried, catching him. Ramses's breaths came in ragged gasps. "Listen to me. The network must be destroyed. Every root, every branch. Or it will rise again." His hand gripped Neket's wrist with surprising strength. "Swear it." Tears filled Neket's eyes. "I swear, my king." With a final shuddering breath, Ramses II, the living god of Egypt, was gone. In the days that followed, Thebes was a city of whispers once more. The official story declared that Ramses had died peacefully, surrounded by loyal servants. The shadow keeper was never mentioned, but Neket knew the truth. He began the dangerous work of dismantling the spy network, piece by piece, even as its remnants plotted in the shadows. For every agent he uncovered, 2 more seemed to take their place. The battle for Egypt's soul was far from over. Years later, when future rulers looked upon the glorious statues of Ramses and the towering temples of his reign, they would see only the visible symbols of power. They would never know the terrible price paid to keep those monuments standing. The legacy of the eyes and ears of the pharaoh faded into myth, a cautionary tale whispered by a few who still remembered. Because in the end, the greatest threat to Egypt had never come from foreign invaders or rebellious provinces. It had come from within, from the silent watchers who believed themselves above even the gods. And with that, the spies' empire of secrets finally collapsed, leaving a legacy written in betrayal. If this story kept you hooked until the very end, smash that like button, share this video with someone who loves untold spy stories, and subscribe right now, because the next ancient case we uncover might be even more shocking.